after time, I tell myself that I'm so lucky to be loving you. So lucky to be the one you run to see in the evening when the day is through. I only know what I know. The passing years will show. You've kept my love so young, so new. And time after time, you hear me say that I'm so lucky to be loving you.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to this late show or an early show, depending on wherever you find yourself on this mortal coil. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to talk about the coming recession and its after effects on the watch world, on the horological world. I want to start by a few choice quotes that Fortune magazine brings to us. Of course, some of you should still feel free to take financial advice from your favorite YouTuber because it's entertaining, because it's so much fun, because it's such a good time. We're having such a great time. But Fortune Mag tells us, hot take, recession is coming. So let's scroll through whatever these people with PhDs are telling us. 7 of the world's top economic minds think a global recession is coming. Some say it's already here. But it's just a market correction, right? Let's go through what these brilliant minds are telling us. Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase CEO. We don't know if it's a minor one or superstorm. Pardon me, Sandy. I remember that one. You better brace yourself. That was Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase. We printed up too much money and just thought the party would never end. That resonates a little bit, huh? We printed up too much money and just thought the party would never end. That one goes to those of those in the watch world that bought up watches with free money and fraudulent PPP loans. The party is over. Carl Icahn, the chairman of Icahn Enterprises. There we have WTO, World Trade Organization's Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I think a global recession is coming. That is what I think we are edging into. The global recession is coming. Ken Griffin, Citadel CEO. Everybody likes to forecast recessions, and there will be one. It's just a question of when, and frankly, how hard, right? That's the question at this point, not that this hype model or that hype model remains largely unaffected or that this other one only dropped 20%. No, the idea is that the recession is coming. In many ways, it's already here, especially in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in China, in the UK. Effects are already being felt, but once the winter sets in, once the real brunt of those gas shortages, the natural gas shortage, is going to be felt, once that is reflected in the prices for utilities, natural gas and electricity, everything is going to be affected, and chances are that the downturn will continue. And hey, by all means, my forecast is, and I don't divine into the future, I cannot do that, but the drop in the watch markets is going to continue. The economics of thrift and a new era of austerity is slowly but surely setting in. So it's time to pay some heed to the experts. Kristalina Georgieva, IMF Managing Director. For hundreds of millions of people, it will feel like a recession. So buckle up. It's just a feeling. But hey, sometimes feeling is all we have in this cold, cruel world. So buckle up. Kristalina Georgieva, that was the IMF Managing Director. Nouriel Roubini, known as Dr. Doom, a man after my own heart. Many zombie institutions, zombie households, corporates, banks, shadow banks, and zombie countries are going to die. We're basically walking over the abyss, Dr. Roubini says. So we'll see who is swimming naked. That's a very pleasant image, actually. I don't know if it's appropriate at this time. But yes, the emperor's clothes are coming off. They have been off. We're now finally seeing it. A series of harsh events and unprecedented macroeconomic policies are threatening to throw development into crisis. This is David Malpass, World Bank president. So here we are. We have listened to Chet Baker, his rendition of Time After Time. And once my funny Valentine kicked in, I couldn't stop immediately. So we listened to a little bit of that as well. But today I will mostly talk about how the watch industry will respond potentially to this most recent crisis. And I'm in many ways inspired by this thoughtful and well-researched piece that came out a little more than a year ago in A Collected Man. and it was simply titled How Watchmaking Adapts in Times of Crisis. And one of the most brilliant things they did in this article, of course, in addition to asking the right kinds of experts and industry insiders, they actually focused on the blind spots, right? Rather than obsessing about how watchmaking responded to and survived the quartz crisis, which is quite foundational, quite fundamental, but also which has been given perhaps extensive coverage already. They took as their data points the 1997 Asian crisis and the 2008 market crash. So it introduces a very original perspective. And I don't think it was a coincidence that it came out in March 2021, which was one of those moments where we realized that we are, in fact, stepping into a new normal after the corona pandemic, after COVID-19. So they did this well-researched piece about the various ways in which the watch market, in which the industry has responded to moments of crisis in recent history. And the three takeaways they had from this analysis were fairly simple, and I will try to break them down with you. But they were, one, that the watchmakers basically seize upon their own networks of distribution, right? They're trying to have a tighter control on how they distribute their watches. Two, that they become more interested in and invested in opening new markets, right? Watchmakers, these big companies start looking into different markets, different kinds of buyers, possibly. And three, which is a point of particular interest to me, there is increasingly in these moments of crisis a turn towards tradition, a turn towards those fail-safe, iconic designs that seem to have stood the test of time. One of the points they're making is rather than focusing on technical innovation for innovation's sake, rather than focusing on experimental designs that are too far out of the box, that push the envelope perhaps a little too extensively. In times of crisis, these big-time watch companies are actually going back to what has proven reliable, what has actually defined their brand, and what are those iconic models that have, as I mentioned, stood the test of time. So the first point was that the crisis changed the way we buy watches, right? Nowadays, it's become a little more commonsensical, if not universal, that a lot of the big brands, such as Audemars Piguet, such as, let's say, A. Lange & Söhne, and even Patek Philippe, actually focus on selling watches through their own salons and boutiques, right? We can look at the entire spectrum, and in many ways, Audemars Piguet stands at one end of that spectrum, having eliminated most, if not all, of their traditional authorized dealers in jewelers. They have increasingly opened their own boutiques that are led by their corporate, or that are actually established in collaboration with an established prominent uh, jeweler or watch seller in the area, in that region, but they are nevertheless brand exclusive boutiques which only deal in Audemars Piguet. You can say something similar about Arlan Gonzone, which is a little uh, further away from Audemars Piguet on that spectrum, where they are making every effort to seize the terms of their own distribution, focus their sales as much as possible through their own boutiques and brand exclusive boutiques that they have worldwide, and ultimately are doing all they can to be in charge of how their watches are allocated, right? Basically trying to get ahead of, trying to get in front of the secondary market. And at this time, of course, this is all the more relevant, right? Because we have seen at least 2 to 3 years, if not much longer, a period of time where a lot of these brands, especially the big four, Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron Constantin, had a lot of models that sold for multiple times their retail price on the secondary market. And these companies reaped very little from that inflated, that bloated gray market, at least in immediate fashion, right? You can make the argument that this craze about seeing watches as investment grade assets, by and large, actually enhanced these brand images. The idea that a watch can be an investment grade asset has, in fact, helped some of these big brands. The fact remains that in terms of direct profits, in terms of the short term, they have seen little of that financial gain. So it only makes sense at this point in time that we will see more and more of the premier brands, of the elite brands, of the so-called high horological brands operating either by establishing their own boutiques, collaborating with established watch sellers in major regions, China, the Middle East, Central Europe, of course, Northern Europe to a certain extent. Or alternatively, and we have started seeing this, for example, with the most recent opening of Sincere High Horology in Singapore, you will see watch boutiques that have a particular method of curation, that perhaps collaborate with a number of different brands, but make very conscious choices about what they're stocking from those brands and what that stock, what that curated collection represents to the end customer. Right? Let me just pull up, for example, what I mean by sincere fine watches. I always found to be a very quaint but beautiful name when it comes to a watch company. There we go. They are based out of Singapore, Asia's premier watch specialist, and they have already an established presence and reliable network through which they sold a lot of different brands. You know, of course, Rolex, Tudor, a lot of the big players, but they have recently opened SHH in Marina Bay Sands, where they focus on high horological independence, such as Grönfeld, such as Laurent Ferrier, Grebel Forcé, right? Lang und Heine, Chapek, or Chapek et Compagnie, Louis Moinet. So you see, they very carefully chose a different concept and curated a selection exclusively from independent brands, from those brands that are on the verge of breaking into the horological mainstream, that have proven their mettle, but are clearly in need of different kinds of distribution networks. They have opened a store in Marina Bay Sands that brings together these variety of brands and presents them in this coherent, appealing, and really quite extravagant and elegant way. I really appreciate this, and I think it also resonates with something that Chopard did a few years ago. I think when they were dealing with this interregnum, when the industry was transitioning from out of Basel world and trying to come up with a new trade show that would be as inclusive as possible, apart from that tradition of the Basel Fair. And before SIHH, the trade show that we today know already as Watches and Wonders, the show that was started by largely Richemont-based brands. Before that took off, I remember Chopard did something with a particularly high horological quasi-independent focus in Monte Carlo. And it was, it seemed to be a chance occasion, right? Apparently they had not one, but two storefronts in Monte Carlo. And they had to find something else to do with one of them, because how many Chopard boutiques can you actually have in the French Riviera, and specifically in Monte Carlo? So they used one of them to showcase a number of high horological brands, of course, including their LUC manufacturer, which makes watches at that level frequently adorned with the hallmark of Geneva, as well as achieving qualité fleurier in more exclusive models. So one addition that I can make to what my colleagues at A Collected Man have come up with a little more than a year ago is this particular concept that seems to be gaining traction. It's not only the case that the big four and brands that are proximate to them are opening their exclusive boutiques and trying to seize the means of their distribution. The smaller brands that focus on high horology, that already have established a certain cachet in terms of their horological mettle, are pulling together sources, are teaming up, are collaborating to find new ways of showcasing their products. And by that, they are aiming to reach different kinds of markets and different kinds of customers. Hi, Nick. You're not late, man. You're here on your own time. Love to see you. Feel free to jump on and shoot the shit for a while if you would like. I would love that. The link is pinned there. We'll send it again. You're always more than welcome here, as you know. So this is the first step in many ways that in which the watch industry has been responding to crisis already in the late 90s, already in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crash. They were trying to find ways of taking charge of their own distribution networks. So far, that has been in the form of the creme de la creme brands establishing their own boutiques or collaborating um, with their most cherished authorized dealers in opening brand exclusive boutiques. Nowadays, we see uh, the up and coming high horological brands trying to push themselves in, trying to penetrate into that market by way of pooling their resources, by way of collaborating among each other, and by way of trying to find partners so that they can open these sorts of focused, themed, and well curated boutiques to reach the end customer. And by that, and this will bring us to the second point, they are actually reaching a different kind of customer as well. And I want to clarify that a little bit. At the end of the day, you might say, well, these are all established customers. It's quite rare that someone starts their watch collecting journey by buying an independent. I'm not going to try to disprove that point. I'm not going to present some anecdotal evidence to counter it. But what I will say is this: it usually takes people a lot of time and often a lot of research, a lot of hand holding and friendly word of mouth before they even get to think, much less really discover in person and in boutiques a lot of these independent brands, right? And not every independent brand, even the most respected high horological brands, have the kind of capital backing like FP Jean has at this point in time, for example, where where Chanel has a stake in the brand, right? I'm not sure if Chapek can go ahead and open a boutique by themselves in Miami Beach, go ahead and open a house in New York City like Audemars Piguet has, or push for one of the architectural marvels of horology, such as the FP Jean boutique on the Sunset. Right, it's one of the most remarkable storefronts that you have ever seen. Right, and I'm saying this as someone who likes a lot of FP Jean, but I'm not particularly a big fan of the brand. I'm not really lusting after any of their watches, but anyone who has been into that space can tell you how special it is in terms of how much natural light it takes in. Anyone who has tried on a watch in an authorized dealer knows that it's a very different environment, and nothing looks the way it does look or it should look in natural light, and that can take away a lot from the experience. While you step into the FP Jean boutique, and before you are even treated into the full bar that is actually the centerpiece of the entire boutique, your the plain Jane Rolex that you're wearing on your hand starts looking like $1,000,000. So not every brand, even the most respected ones like Kronefeld, like Chapek, like Greubel Forcé, like Romain Gauthier, they can't just start up and set up shop in the hustling and bustling metropolitan centers of the world on their own. So they're coming together, they're they're establishing relationships and partnerships with authorized dealers and networks that already have that sort of presence. And they're focusing on finding ways of presenting their products, Parmigiano Fleurier, I should add to that, presenting their products in a concerted and thoughtful manner, but not necessarily in an exclusive manner, right? There's nothing wrong with, pardon me, stepping into a store and discovering Creux Belforcet, Chapek, Parmigiani, and Grönefeld as part of that same experience. So it basically is a new way of finding the watch enthusiast. Now they're actually, these brands, these smaller brands are finding ways to face the customer, to establish direct contact, rather than just having one East Coast authorized dealer, one West Coast authorized dealer in the US, where most of the people, even people who are remotely curious or very enthusiastic about those brands, can't see their products firsthand, right? They come together, collaborate in these sorts of boutiques, and they can actually reach the customer. Let's see. Baby girl, hey, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Mookie, it's wonderful. Nick, I haven't been to their Miami boutique. I'm talking about FP Jean. I am talking about the Sunset joint they have here in Los Angeles. I don't know. I'm not going to betray the confidence of certain people who are internal to the brand, who have told me a number of wonderful things about Miami. But I was talking about the Los Angeles joint. Mookie says, I try to stay very serious in LHV streams out of fear and respect for LHV's knowledge. Hey, no need to be, Mookie. You're more than welcome to jump on, in fact. Nick's kingship is recognized. It's hard. Nicholas says, they give me free water at McDonald's and Chipotle. I feel fancy. Hey, man. Anything with bubbles would work. I'm given sparkling water in a luxury goods store, and I feel like $1 million. Voulez-vous? Hello, watch people. Watch people. Nice to see you, man. We're up late. We're up late talking about watches. The punters recognize each other. Dirk Diggler is here. Hey, it's been a while. It's been a while. My brother here is Erdis. Happy Sukkot. Chag Sameach to you as well, my friend. Love you. Love you, brother. Bowser is here. Good evening. Good evening to you too. Voulez-vous says, you must publish a book. You're so knowledgeable. There's actually a book project, but it's gonna take a while, and it needs obviously some sort of funding. So before the channel gets monetized, I try to not spread myself too thin. But it is in the works, as well as a couple of other ventures that are connected to this little fiefdom that I'm building. I cannot, in good conscience, call it an empire yet, but it is great. But yes, it needs to be something focused. I already have a very specific topic in mind, but let's save it for our celebration. That should be in the works. That should be in the works. I'm closer than ever. With that being said, hit the like button. A little bit more exposure always helps, and it doesn't cost anything. and tell your friends. There's so much content to now share, that can introduce other people to the channel. I think it's a better way to say, hey, check this out, rather than just sending a link and imposing ourselves on people just to say, hey, subscribe. So thank you, Muki. I appreciate you. Thank you, Nick. So we said one way watch companies respond to crisis is by taking charge of their own distribution networks, and that's a familiar refrain already from the 90s and early 2000s, where Big Four plus Lange and others have already done this. Now we are basically experiencing a second phase of that, where high horological brands that have gained a certain ground and traction through word of mouth, through horological gossip, through channels and platforms like this one, are trying to reach their end customer and create by that a new potential for their product by pulling together their resources and by collaborating with established networks, so that they can have a one-on-one, face-to-face relationship with their potential customers, even if it is not in an exclusive boutique. Voulez-vous says, I got myself in trouble and started a book club with Crappy Luxury. Feel free to read too. We are reading Longitude by Dava Sobel. I would love to join, but my earlier venture has fallen by the wayside in a way. We used to do everyday philosophy, and in a channel that's not monetized, it's a little too much work. But once this becomes Voulez-vous a full-time venture for me, which it will eventually, sooner or later, that is going to be part of the daily broadcast routine. There is going to be a morning broadcast that will be in the spirit of a book club, where we read together, usually philosophical books, but books that don't try to lecture you, that don't try to preach, that don't try to systematize, but books that give you practical knowledge that you can apply in your life, right? So I respect what you and Crappy Luxury are doing. I would love to drop by once every so often if it is a book that I've already read, possibly. I read quite a bit, but I can't make any commitments. Again, I'm not trying to stretch myself too thin, but love you and thank you for the invitation. And I'm going to go back to reviewing watch books, but again, I need to save some more money for that. I have a couple more picture books, right? Coffee table books that I'm going to share. There are a few more in the pipeline. I want to talk more about Nick Fox's Reverso book. I want to talk more about his book on Chanel watches that just came out, actually. I want to bring more attention to the new Audemars Piguet Royal Oak book that came out, from iconoclast to icon, in celebration of the model's 50th anniversary. So that is certainly coming back very soon, right? The horological book club aspect is going to come back, but anything more than that, I think, is at this point in time a little too much work, unless I aspire to be a whole entertainment network. And as you guys know, I'm not that entertaining. It's a short book. No need for Cliff. Hey, Dirk is a lazy punter, man. The shorter the book gets, he would rather read two, three lines from Cliff Notes than the actual reading. So we have covered the first 2 points, right? The tighter control on distribution networks and the longing for a new customer base. Before I move on to the aspect of design where these watchmakers actually start turning towards what is safe, what has been proven successful, and what has stood the test of time, let me try to think a little further about how these two trends are affecting the market currently. I'll start with a very specific and small example. As you have seen, since late March, increasingly on these live streams and on the little corner that we have established, the little pumpkin patch that we have built in this YouTube space, more and more enthusiasts, more and more collectors are getting those calls from established brands, right? It's not only Rolex, by the way, and it's not only some of the less desired stainless steel models. It's also brands like Vacheron Constantin. It's also brands like Alain Gonzone. It's also brands like Gégé Lecoutre, who also had a moment even with some of those new and newly colorful dials that they started with their tribute to 1931 collection for their flagship model Reverso, right? All those models that seem to have long and very extensive wait lists seem to become available. People who have been on the wait lists for these models are getting those calls. And you know why that is, right? Because it's become so much more difficult for the small-time flipper, right? You remember Dr. Doom, Dr. Nouriel was talking about, Nouria Rubini was talking about these zombie households and zombie companies. Well, the zombie companies in our universe are these filthy flippers, right? Who basically try to get all these watches, as many of them as possible, sometimes even put them on credit cards or credit that they have acquired through other kinds of schemes, and turn around and sell them for a small profit. And that small profit had grown exponentially in the last few years. So certain Rolex models, if you could get them, you could turn around and sell them for 3, 5K and more of a profit. That's not possible anymore, right? A lot of these bigger fish, a lot of the big time dealers and gray market profiteers are not really utilizing, not really energizing, not really mobilizing the small time flippers and the smaller fish at this point with the same energy. So those small time flippers are not responding to their phones anymore. Those small time flippers are turning down the watches that come through authorized dealers and boutiques. Those smaller time flippers are slowly but surely going out of business. So those watches that would have ended up in their hands only to be flipped to someone like you or flipped to a larger gray market establishment are now being bought by people who actually want them, who actually like their watches. And what an interesting thought and what an invention to people who are actually going to wear and enjoy them. So that is happening. Bezos. Hey, nice to see you, man. Mookie, I already have a few recommendations, but we can go back to this topic as a little break soon enough. Bezos, nice to see you, man. Slinging, selling solar panels. Hey, you have to diversify your assets, right? So it's a difficult time. Ultimately, what I'm saying is it had the way that especially the smaller time flippers and people who basically started or tried to turn this into a business specifically during the pandemic, those newcomers, those neophytes had started getting on the nerves of brand executives, surely. So Rolex in recent time, with the help of mystery shoppers, have clamped down on this and have been taking away so many authorized dealerships precisely because they engage in this kind of practice, and worse yet, have connections to larger gray market networks where they literally, I'm talking about authorized dealers, are selling watches through the back door, right? We had read earlier in the year that, especially in the Chicago area, there was a federal investigation targeting a few different authorized dealers, as well as a number of sales associates from them who were taking bribes for watches, who were engaged in all sorts of fraud, who were basically allocating watches to friends and relatives who would go on to sell them and so make a little money on the side. People have been clamping down on this. A lot of the big brands have started doing this very efficiently. And once they have done this, and once this whole enterprise has already become much less profitable for the small-time flipper, it's become quite clear as an after effect in today's market that people who actually collect these watches, who actually wear these watches, are getting watches allocated. And it happens at every level. And it should be encouraging to people like you to remain patient, right? Hold your place in those waiting lists. Get on waiting lists, right? Don't despair when they say 1 or 2 year wait. Visit those people regularly, right? Establish a personal relationship, not only with a faceless AD and a storefront, but with a specific sales associate who can actually recognize you, who knows what you want, and who might actually get back to you with exactly what you want, not try to push you something else. Zan says mystery shoppers got the AP boutique in Costa Mesa. Yeah, last time I was in there, Zan, when I went to the watch time event there, the collectors event in South Coast Plaza, I did not see any of the older sales associates or boutique managers. They had all been, well, let's say it diplomatically, as they say, they're no longer working with us. Voulez-vous, good night. It's nice to have you here. Thank you for dropping by. It's a pleasure. Yes, 1 book per day, 1 page per book. That sounds like an adage that coach might actually heed. And Zan says, I was there for that event. Yeah, I was trying to communicate with you, Zan, through Instagram. And I was hoping that, since I don't actually know what you look like, And since I've exposed my face so many times in pleasant and unpleasant occasions online, I thought you might approach me, and a lot of people did, and it was a pleasure. But hey, we're in Southern California. Our paths will cross eventually, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Mookie has a very perceptive comment here. Flippers who exist solely to exploit temporary market conditions are, by definition, transients. Yes, and they will not be missed. I can tell you that much, Mookie. They will not be missed by people like me. They will not be missed by the watchmakers, and they will not be missed by the larger community of enthusiasts that share a common passion and that are day by day becoming more and more knowledgeable. Bezel says, leave your AD a nice, sincere review on their Google page. The wonders that can do, the wonders that can do. Just crafting a few thoughtful sentences about your visit, even if it didn't end up in a purchase, um, would certainly leave a permanent record of your goodwill. Zan says the director and assistant director got arrested for it, federal charges. Yep. Yep. People who play with fire and try to engage in small time fraud should be really careful. It's no laughing matter. It's no laughing matter, and they will come after you. They will come after you, and not everyone might be able to buy millions and millions of dollars of watches from you in one visit or in one season. But trust me, a lot of these people, and I don't know how many sales associates actually listen to me who work for those brands, but a lot of those people that you spurn in an attempt to, in an attempt to be honest, in an attempt to preserve some of those watches to your high-flying, high-rolling clients, a lot of those people are very knowledgeable, very resourceful, and actually have enough financial resources to get you in trouble. They might not get watches from you, but trust me, some of these geezers are very self-entitled. So you don't give them what they want. And in addition to that, you actually mistreat them. You rip up the notes you have taken after their visit, where they very kindly presented you a number of very humble models that they are actually pursuing. They will come after you. So it's not worth jail time, right? No, the chump change you will make in shifting those watches and flipping them and whatever else you're trying to do, it's really not worth it. With that being said, we are just crossing the threshold of our first hour. So hit the like button if you haven't done so already. You are just dropping by, if you're just stumbling upon this channel, here with Watch Talk on a daily basis, I am happy to have you, but subscribe and scroll through the contents of the channel. There's a lot of stuff that you can check out on your time. Of course, the channel is by definition focused on the history and stories that follow these timepieces, but there's also lots of content related to new releases. And as we are talking now, a lot of different kinds of content that will help you make knowledgeable decisions and that will help you pursue new watches at retail. So keep that in mind. Good night, Dirk. Nice to see you. Nice to have you here. So let's let's shift gears a little bit and think about how some of these uh, some of the after effects of the crisis might be felt in terms of designs, in terms of the kinds of releases that um, the watchmakers are coming up with these days. And again, I will take my cue from this brilliant article from A Collected Man, which um, actually more recently, I love Maldives has sent me and reminded me and helped me recall. So I thank him again. And the point they make about this, through the lessons of the 1997 Asian crisis and the 2008 financial crisis, by and large, the watchmakers are playing safe. They are going back to their archives. They are focusing on releasing, reiterating their heritage models, and they're taking less chances and they're conducting certainly much less in the way of experiments when it comes to design, when it comes to their new releases. And I don't need to tell you anything about Rolex when it comes to this particular point. We know that Rolex always prioritizes evolution over revolution, that they reiterate their models very gradually. They operate at a glacial pace, or rather, they progress in a glacial pace. Oftentimes, the smallest cosmetic change they make, or the tiny little bits of improvement they improvise on a caliber, or a new in-house movement, much less a complication that they introduce, can suddenly take the entire market by storm. And that's because, right, they always hold their cards close to the chest and move at a glacial pace at any rate. And it turns out that that is a surefire strategy when facing a crisis, and that in fact other companies follow a similar strategy when they're facing hardship, or when they're simply in an environment where they might feel safe, but they want to take less risk to weather the storm. And um, this will, the reason I left this to the end is because the product cycles don't really operate on a year by year basis, right? You know that whenever Watches and Wonders are coming up, all these charlatans are coming up with renderings and everything, and try to present it as like new releases that they learned about on good authority. Where if they actually had those sources, they should actually let us know now what Rolex is going to release in 2025 for Watches and Wonders, right? I'm sure they can't do that, but they should be able to, because Rolex doesn't design watches with 3 months to go before Watches and Wonders, right? Whatever is going to come out in Watches and Wonders in 2023 is actually put into work in 2020, in 2 years ago. So it takes about 3 years for watchmakers to introduce new models, which means whatever we are talking about now in terms of going back to heritage, if we have seen a little bit of that, we will see much more of it in the near future. In about 2-3 years, you will see more and more companies coming out with releases that are much more somber, much more classical, much less loud. You know, uh, my co-pilot, regular guest on this channel, my friend Aussie expat, has talked about this in many ways, focusing on the aspect of color, right? How some of these uh, louder colors, dial colors, watch face colors, are not going to stand much chance if a new period of austerity sets in. And I completely agree with that, but it's actually something that will go beyond um, dial colors, right? But it is a great point that in an age of austerity, if and when people go for luxury, if and when they choose to put their money into a luxury good, they go for something relatively discreet. They go for something that's perhaps still recognizable to the trained eye, to those in the know, but things that would otherwise would be mostly invisible and unremarkable, um, items that will, for the most part, fly under the radar. So over the next 2 3 years, we will see, and I'm saying maybe less than 3 years, because I'm sure a lot of the watchmakers have put plans into works already when they realized that Coco 19 wasn't going away anytime soon. A lot of them put plans in place, the fruits of which, the results of which, the products of which we are going to see perhaps already in the Watches and Wonders 2023. You are going to see a lot more classic designs. You are going to see more brands releasing and re-releasing their flagship models, their iconic models. You'll see a lot of historically faithful re-editions, a lot more of that. And you will see less by way of, or in the way of, experimental horology or out of the box kind of design. Nick, I don't know if you are also taking your farewell, but if you're saying good night to us and not just Dirk, take care, my friend. Have a good rest of your weekend. So they actually asked at the time, William Massena, who's of course a storied watchmaker, and who today brings us very interesting and time-honored designs through Massena Lab. At that time, they asked William Massena, who believes that if you want to see how large global events have affected the watch world, you need to look 3 to 4 years after the event. If we take the example of the 2008 financial crisis, the peak of which was arguably the collapse of Lehman Brothers in September 2008, then we have to look at what watch companies were bringing out in 2011 and 2012 as an indicator of how they reacted to this fiscal event. Massena says from about 2000 to 2008, there was a golden age in watchmaking. And in a recent interview, by the way, right after Jack Forster has joined Watchbox, they did a wonderful, extensive interview with him where he talked about this moment, right, in terms of the kinds of crazy releases that were coming out, such as the Ulysse Nardin Freak, right? That's a product of this particular era, the golden age of watchmaking, where some of these watchmakers, some of these established brands were not just tinkering with their movements to introduce gradual improvements, but were actually trying to find new ways of representing time on a wristwatch. There were loads of brands, Massena says, too many, some might say, and a lot of big ones were doing a lot of new things. So that's, for example, Ulysse Nardin Freak, And Massena's example is Patek Philippe's Advanced Research Program. There were a few years of development before the first innovation with the Cylinvar escape wheel, right? Patek, of course, starting with 2009, has been using, as you know, their own Patek Philippe seal on the movements. There are a lot of mythological stories about it, but ultimately it boils down to the fact that they are using a lot of silicon pieces in their movements, from hairsprings to escape wheels. So here we are. Then we have semi-regular releases by Patek Philippe's R&D department until the 2011 release of reference 5550 perpetual calendar. It then falls quiet for 6 years until the latest release of the reference 5650G travel time Aquanaut. That's the Terminator Aquanaut watch that has that interesting cutout on the 9 o'clock side of the dial to precisely exhibit what is experimental, what is quote unquote advanced about this timepiece. Why such a long break between these two references? It could be put down to market shifts, as the brand's clients no longer craved this type of new release. Right? So Reardon adds to this, saying Patek Philippe would have planned to pause this program roughly 3 years in advance, if not earlier. Right? So ultimately, they do decide, the authors of this article decide that it does go back to 2008, right? It's not a coincidence that they released that advanced research perpetual calendar in 2011 and then fell silent for a while until they released that travel time Aquanaut 5650G. It's this model. And as a counterpoint, they present Patek's newly energized perpetual calendar chronograph, right? 5970 that replaced the 3970. That it was somehow made a quick decision made to sell some watches. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I feel like that's very harsh. But I will present an example from the past, from the 80s specifically, when Audemars Piguet was at the time still reeling from the quartz crisis, and where their bread and butter was not the Royal Oak. Their bread and butter was actually the perpetual calendar watches that they were selling. Their bread and butter was actually that focus on reference 5548, which at some point made them sell, I think, about 2/3 of perpetual calendar mechanical watches that were coming out of Switzerland. I mean, that's a remarkable number. And in and of itself, that watch is a great example of austere design. I just wanna show you a picture of it so you have a better idea. And this is the first iteration as well, right? You know, that the later versions of 5548 have these recessed subdials that that add a little more dimensionality to that watch face, but you cannot get more classical than this. A 36 millimeter case with a double step bezel, perfectly round watch, perfectly balanced with the 4 subdials representing day of the week, date, month, and the moon phase indicator. No messing about with a leap year indicator. No messing about with anything like a power reserve or subsidiary seconds or central seconds. It's just bare bones, classic design, incredibly wearable, classic dress watch with the prestige complication that Audemars Piguet had already perfected. Nothing else necessary, right? Even the design of the hands, you can see, right? You know that the complication hands, the date indicators are of course heat blued and made therefore distinct, but the baton hands for the hours and minutes perfectly blend in with the rest of the watch, and they are in matching material with whatever the watch is made out of. You know, leather strap, simple tank buckle, no exhibition case back. This is how elite high horological brands weather a time of crisis, right? Bread and butter, meat and potatoes, complicated watches, simply executed. Perfect recipe. It's saved Audemars Piguet. It brought them out of the 80s, which could have been an otherwise dark moment. And thankfully, they're here, right? My resentment and bickering about specific boutiques and dealers aside, Audemars Piguet is a brand that I have a lot of respect for, a brand whose history I know in and out, in terms of its horological achievements, in terms of their design perspective. This is a watch that has proven valuable, has stood the test of time, and hey, also still presents a great deal on the secondary market, right? You can find it in even better condition. This is actually a full set, so it's actually just great. And the condition is not too bad. Don't take me wrong. You can find them cheaper. You can find the successor to this model, which is, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say 25657, for even cheaper. In either case, right? This is an example of how established high horological brands turn to models, designs, and recipes that have proven successful in the past. Zan says Patek went too wild with that price. The price of the Aquanaut or 5970? And one of the things that made me really admire this particular piece of writing was how they interpreted Gégé Lecoutre's recent history, right? Gégé Lecoutre in the 90s, right, when Günther Blümlein held the brand under stewardship, basically, was really doing the utmost to live up to that reputation of being the watchmaker's watchmaker. Of course, one of the ways in which Günther Blümlein energized that particular brand was to embrace the Reverso as the flagship model of the brand, right? And Reverso, for decades before that, was not actually even in serial production. If you if you can believe it. But in 1991, with the 60th anniversary model, it actually became the very canvas where Gégé Lecoutre started painting their losing my connection. Can you hear me? If anyone is still in the chat, please confirm that you can hear me, because I feel like I'm experiencing some connection problems here. So, yes, I was saying, one of the reasons, one of the things that made me admire this piece of writing was the way they interpreted the recent history of Gégé Lecoutre as a brand. And as I mentioned, especially under the stewardship of Günther Blümlein, who was leading the charge with, along with IWC, under the umbrella of LMH, Les Manufactures Horlogères. The idea was to live up to that name, the watchmaker's watchmaker. So they used the Reverso as a vehicle for that. They used the Reverso as a vassal for that, because it was their iconic model. But at every turn, at every major anniversary, every other year, they came up with another complication. If it wasn't minute repeater, it was tourbillon. If it wasn't perpetual calendar, it was some other sort of astronomic or zodiac related complication. If it wasn't some sort of duophase, it was a quadriptyque, so on and so forth, right? They basically did everything to revive the reputation of the company that they had established already early in the 20th century by making the most reliable and thinnest calibers in the world. To this day, right, that Gégé Lecoutre caliber 925 that had powered a lot of these 70s beasts for quite some time. I have in mind Patek Philippe Nautilus. I have in mind, of course, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. I have in mind so many other watches by Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet in the dress genre. That caliber 925 is still, to this day, the thinnest automatic movement with a full rotor, right? Many brands have built since micro rotor movements that are much thinner, but in terms of automatic movements with a full rotor, the JLC caliber still holds the first place. The 101 still holds the place of being the smallest mechanical caliber in the world. But you come to 2011. What happened in 2011? That's the 80th anniversary Reverso, right? That was the Reverso tribute. Surefire way, right? Let's just revive what was truly original, truly innovative at the time. Let's just go back to the original Art Deco design. Let's use what at the time was already the practice of customizing the dials for different regimental colors, colors of different kinds of polo attire. Let's revive that. Yes, let's use our ultra thin calibers to add an extra value, but ultimately let's go back to a safe recipe of a heavy hitter, of a great hit, of that successful single that Gégé Lecoultre always had, which is the reversal, right? And this is what William Massena says. They made a clear shift, Gégé Lecoultre, from developing new technologies towards heritage and brand history. Right. In 2004, they had brought out their first ever gyro tourbillon, bringing a new complication to the world. Then they go on to produce Grand Complication, like the reverso Grand Complication triptyque, right? This is the three-faced reverso, which came with 6 new patents for the company and released in 2006. Then in 2011, things seem to change. Remember again that product cycle, the 2008 financial crisis, and 2011 release. We see an anniversary model for the Reverso on its 80th birthday, which recreates the original design. Again, we are not being skeptical, we are not being cynical. This is actually a direction of the brand that I really like, even though I don't necessarily own any of those models. I chose something slightly older when I got my Reverso. But I don't need to prove to anyone how much I love JLC. So we are using it as a test case with the help of William Massena here and the Collected Man article, where you can see a clear shift in response to the 2008 financial crisis that propels them back to heritage, to brand history, to reiterating what was a new design in 1931 as an 80th anniversary model in 2011. To go from a complicated watch which displayed the movement of Earth relative to the sun to what was essentially a reissue in the space of a year, this is rather a stark change of pace. Right? And finally, they boil down to the same point that I mentioned a little while ago. Patek Philippe, Gégé Lecoultre, and even some companies such as Ulysse Nardin went from releasing genuinely new watchmaking technology to rehashing old favorites or adding new colors to the dial. That has been my pet peeve. You guys know this. But this is just a beautiful watch. You know, the original Reverso Tribute model from 2011, the 80th anniversary model, ultra thin, recreating that original design with minimal branding. Of course, the US limited edition that had 2 different 100-piece runs with the syringe hands and a different kind of, Fortina loom is even more appealing, but it is a beautiful watch nonetheless. And this is an interesting addendum they have as well. For those that weathered the storm in terms of the watchmakers, it was often the ability to react quickly to change that made the difference. This led some brands to quickly release new products in order to capture new markets. All these green dials, I guess, would be our contemporary equivalent to that, where others were forced into difficult financial waters. If we look at the Daniel Roth and Jarajanta brands, for example, these were partially owned by the Singaporean watch retailer, the Hourglass at the time. Great models from that period that are still relative bargains in the secondary markets. Just putting it out there. The Daniel Roth masterpiece chronographs from that period. Masters chronographs, I think, from that period that are built on a Zenith El Primero 400 caliber are beautiful watches if you are into that Ellipso Curvex case design. Of course, Jarajanta is a little more out there, but if you fully subscribe to his design philosophy, a lot of great deals to be had there as well. It was understood, due at least in part to the financial difficulties caused by the Asian final crisis, that both companies were sold by the hourglass to Bulgari in 2000, right? And again, pay attention to that moment, 2000. A lot of these um, luxury conglomerates pounced upon heritage brands and these sorts of brand names around that time. That's where Richemont built his empire right around year 2000. LVMH acquired a lot of the brands around 2000. So it's an important turn, and in some way, at least in one aspect, you can see how these global giants took advantage of the Asian financial crisis in 1997 and its aftermath to make these big moves. And this is a very important point, and I will use this as closing. So I will just take a little stop here. The next headline you have already seen, or the sub headline, which was "People Matter More Than Money." Right? And I think ultimately this is what a lot of the authorized dealers, a lot of the watch boutiques are realizing at this point in time. Right? Since they are now at a juncture, at a point in time, at a given moment where they cannot afford to lose any business, you'll increasingly see how much better they treat you, if only because corporate tells them that people matter more than money. And don't take it the wrong way. Don't misunderstand it. Obviously, people only matter to these establishments. People only matter to a business when they bring in money. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing dirty about that. But all this goes to say that these companies understand in difficult financial periods of time that they need to attend to people individually, establish channels where they can reach their customers directly so that they can sell you, first of all, their story, their human face, their character, right? And that is something that they need to do without asking something from you in advance, without asking you to buy jewelry, without asking you to buy this or that less desirable model that you didn't even ask for, right? You have to understand at this point in time, if you step into a watch boutique, you're the one with the money, right? They have to do something to earn that money. And we're back again in a buyer's market where they will do things to earn that money. And it's a good time to be a buyer in this market, especially if you are patient, especially if you're willing to take your time to either wait for better deals and better moments in the secondary markets, or if you're willing to take your time and hold your place in those wait lists as you work to establish and solidify meaningful relationships between you and a specific sales associate in a retail boutique. There's really not much more to it. There's no secret recipe to it. If you find yourself in a situation where you feel either ignored or mistreated or swindled by a watch boutique, a retail location, a brand boutique, or for that matter, a vintage watch dealer, just turn away. Just turn away. There's so many people out there, so many other dealers, so many other brands that actually want to earn your hard-earned money. Um, and this is where the climate is heading to, right? Of course, these are businesses. Of course, this is um, savage capitalism by all means, right? We are not ideologically against that. But at least, once again, in the horological world, the sales associates, the brands are realizing that they need to work to earn your money, that they need to present their best effort, put their best foot forward to actually sell you those watches and to make you want those watches in the first place, right? And that resonates. That certainly resonates with what I was saying earlier in terms of even the up and coming high horological brands wanting to establish their own retail locations, if only in collaboration with other brands that are similar to them, that have a similar approach to them, so they can actually come to you, so they can present you their particular take on horology, so that they can share with you their story, so that they can do something to earn you, earn your trust and your money, right? So all of this is actually interconnected, right? The brands are taking charge of their own distribution networks as much as possible. The bigger brands have already started doing that. Some, like Audemars Piguet, are nearing the completion of that process. Others are just starting out by establishing their own boutiques. Yet others, the smaller fish, are trying to band together, are trying to find more inventive ways to reach the customer directly, so that they can respond to their needs, so that they can share with them their stories, so that they can present a human face with the timepiece that they're trying to sell you. And what can be better, right? I've always been an advocate on this platform that these are completely unnecessary, you know, superfluous, afterthought. A mechanical watch in 2022? Are you crazy? Why spend all that money? Why spend any money at all? You have to have a good reason. You have to have, in fact, perhaps, yes, a rational account, but more importantly, you have to have a certain emotional commitment and intellectual understanding of that piece to spend all that money on a luxury watch. Why do you think Chapek has stepped up their game so much? Why do you think they have been so successful? Right? Is it only because they have come up with their own integrated bracelet, stainless steel sports watch? No, it's because they have reached out to a lot of these outlets, right? They have done special limited editions with them, right? They have done one with Fratello, for example, that was quite beautiful. with that orange seconds dial, it's orange seconds hand, I want to say, and the green dial. But more importantly, right, the CEO, Xavier, what a guy, right? I have not met him in person, but whenever I see uh, this man talk about his watches, talk about Chapek as a brand, I cannot but get excited about it. And I'm someone who just simply does not buy new watches, right? I'm a vintage guy. I love old timepieces, anything from 1940s into the 21st century, anything from uh, Timex to Seiko to Rolex and Patek and F. Bergeron, Alain Gonzone, and everything. Audemars Piguet. I love all watches, but to me, um, it is really the people and the stories that these watches convey, the emotional charge that they can transfer. That to me is a lot more important. And when you have someone who can come to you, even if it is just through a few YouTube videos, and actually sound like they care, actually sound like that they are themselves emotionally invested in this product, that matters a lot, right? And the way uh, I'm forgetting his last name. I'm about to say Xavier de Rochefoucauld, but not Rochefoucauld. What is his last name? The Chapek CEO. Roquemarel. Okay. Xavier de Roquemarel is he's I know he just came through a health crisis, and he's back. Like, he took a sabbatical, and now he's back in full throttle, right? He is conveying the same energy, and that he cares, because he could have retired. He could have decided not to come back. He could have said, to hell with it. My health is more important. And I'm sure he's not sacrificing his health. Don't take me the wrong way. But he could have said, hey, I'll just spend some time with my grandchildren or whatever. I don't know his family situation. But no, he's back, and he's back with the same energy, if not more energy. He's back bringing the same kind of joy and excitement into an emergent brand. The name that it carries might itself be historical, but this is a brand that they have built from the ground up, and they're expanding. And do you think it's a coincidence uh, that they have the leadership of someone who cares so much emotionally and intellectually? Do you think it's a coincidence that this is one of the brands that has been an advocate of transparency at all levels, right? These are the people who make our dials. These are the people who do the guilloche work for us. These are the people who assemble our movements. Oh, by the way, there's this movement that we actually do make in-house. This other place makes the crystals for our watches. Yet this atelier in France supplies us with straps. These kinds of new approaches, the innovative interventions that the brands will bring to the table, will make or break their future. And a lot of it boils down to the human factor, right? There's no there's no other way. Other brands can generate a certain kind of success momentarily, when they have that one hit, so thereby become one hit wonders. But it's the brands that actually commit in all different ways and at various levels to their products. It's those brands that can touch you in a more personal way, that can get closer to you physically by establishing those channels, and virtually on social media by telling you the right stories. Those are the brands that going to weather the storm. Those are the brands that are not only going to survive but thrive uh, in the aftermath of the coming economic crisis. So good to see you. It's nice to see you as well. I don't know which watch you were referring to, user unknown. Thank you for being here and thank you for your kind words. Things are always going great, especially when I see people like you in the chat. I post the link again because we are once again nearing the end of our broadcast. We have talked about how the industry can respond to the crisis. We talked about how specifically watchmakers are going to respond to the incoming financial storm. I have taken cue from a Collected Men article that was published a little more than a year ago in the context of the pandemic. An article that looked back to 1997 Asian crisis and the 2008 financial market crash. And I have relayed both their story and talked about some of their conclusions in relation to our time. Feel free to jump on if you have any questions and want to ask those questions face to face. Feel free to send in your questions in the chat. I would be more than happy to respond to them in the best way possible. Otherwise, I will just use the rest of the time to sum up what I've talked about. And it boils down to 3 points. Brands are taking charge of their own distribution networks. That has been well presented by the article that we read together, which was talking about how the most elite major brands have already found ways of reaching their customer directly, allocating their watches as exclusively as possible. Audemars Piguet is the example of that, but many have followed since. Some are just starting out, right? But opening boutiques or brand exclusive storefronts in collaboration with established dealers is one way of doing that. Shrinking, gaining distribution regionally, and then shrinking your network of authorized dealers minimizes some of the risks. Rolex has started doing that. And up and coming brands that have already earned their horological stripes are now coming together, and this is my insight, pooling their resources and also establishing relationships in various regions of the world so they can come directly to their customers, established and potential, so they can sell you their stories, their particular take on horology, so that they can share their passion and their history and their artisanship with you in a hands-on manner. And that brings us to the second point. All of these brands, in their different ways, are trying to reach a different kind of customer, right? And the brands that are using in tandem this hands-on experience, this direct contact with the customer, with carefully curated and thoughtfully created social media content, are the ones that are on the crest of the wave. Those are the ones who are not only surviving, but thriving. And the third point that I articulated, mostly with help of the example of Chapek as really masters of this art, is to establish direct emotional relationship with your customer, with the people, right? Having full consciousness of the fact that the customer has the money that you have to earn, right? You have to prove your mettle. You have to show them your horological achievements, your reliability, your technical expertise, the kind of emotion and story that you bring to this highly overpriced, highly niche luxury product. You have to do the legwork. And the brands that do the legwork and don't just treat it as busy work, the brands that actually enjoy having this sort of human relationship with their customer, precisely because they are themselves emotionally invested in their creations, are one step ahead, are already ahead of the game. And the final point, which became really relatively simple at the end, when we went through the examples of Audemars Piguet in the 80s, Patek Philippe in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, as well as Jaeger-LeCoultre in the aftermath of 2008 as well. There is a distinct turn from horological innovation, from experimental approaches to the archives, to recreating the heritage of the brand, to re-energizing the historical roots of an established watchmaking house, right? And the perfect example for that was Jaeger-LeCoultre turning from the gyro tourbillon and the triptyque to a watch that has, perpetual calendar, zodiac display, the equation of time and everything else, to something in 2011 that is simply a recreation of the brand's flagship model, the Reverso, right? And again, in the most bare bones, elegant, tried and true dial design, just one line on the dial, Reverso, ultra thin, discreet, black, and that was an extremely successful venture for Jaeger-LeCoultre, and I think did wonders for them in the last decade, even though those of us who are big fans of the brand still expect even more from Jaeger-LeCoultre in terms of their success in the market. But it's not always about that. The fact that they're here to stay can be a small victory for those of us to cherish. So with that, I'm coming to the end of this broadcast. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. It helps a lot. Spread the word, share the link with others, share the content of the channel and your kind comments about this platform on other platforms, on other social media, on other channels. Tell all your friends. There's so much content. If you scroll through, I'm sure you will find something, 5 to 15 minutes that you can share with a friend, and somehow start a conversation and bring them onto this platform in a meaningful way. That's what I like. Ultimately, for me, the small group of people that I have who are actually invested in this channel, who have a stake on this platform, who are actually actively engaging in the conversation, even with your messages, questions, comments, and encouragement from the chat. That to me is really meaningful. So if you can bring just one friend, that is an immense resource for me. And ultimately, of course, I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can get something in return for all the time and efforts I put into this channel. So any help that you can give me on that basis to reach that goal is invaluable to me. So bring in one friend. It will mean a lot, and we will celebrate in style once I do reach 1,000 subscribers here. I promise you that. I'm almost there on Instagram, by the way. I have almost reached 1,000 followers. So if you haven't followed me on Instagram yet, please do so by clicking that link. Um, if before this channel gets monetized, you want to support me, and I would happily return that support in terms of customized, dedicated content for you. All you need to do is to send a contribution through PayPal. I've posted all the links, but I will repeat here. That's Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com, Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com. That is also my primary point of contact. So feel free to send me an email as well, and let me know if there is a particular topic that you would want me to address, either in terms of a shorter video or on a live stream. Feel free to also just reach out to me with any message, any questions, any concerns at lordhellespuntv.com. Sorry, lordhellespuntv at gmail.com. For contributions, again, I have a Cash App, $LHVVV, $LHVVV. And if you want to make a consistent contribution, show your abiding support to increase the quality and quantity of content on this platform, you can always click that link and subscribe and become a member on Patreon. And I would appreciate that. In either case, friends, we have come to the end of our broadcast. I love you all. Thank you for being with me for these 2 hours. Thank you for sharing your passion and your knowledge for wristwatches. Thank you, and thanks for all the support you have given me so far. We are going to create something very big and very special on this platform in the long term. I believe in that, and I will see you tomorrow to continue the conversation. Adieu until then. Lovely to see you, Y2K, by the way. Thank you for dropping by.